Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SB1070 5 Years of Resistance Google Hangout. We're excited to have Carlos Garcia of the Puente Movement, his co-worker Nataly Cruz, and Erika Andiola of Dream Action Coalition. Today is the day 5 years ago that Governor Brewer signed SB1070, the state's racial profiling, into law, sparking enormous outcry locally, nationally, and across the country. We're marking this watershed moment with a march here in Phoenix from the Capitol to 4th Avenue Jail. Today is a day where Sheriff Joe Arpaio is also on trial for his racial profiling and his blatant disregard for the law. And we're visiting with Carlos, Erika, and Nataly to revisit the past 5 years, talk about what this was like back then in 2010 and where are we now. So Carlos, Erika, maybe you can start by just saying, where were you on this day 5 years ago and what was going on?
Yeah, okay, I'll start. Well, thank you so much, B, for inviting me. And 5 years ago, I was actually together with a lot of people within the community at the Capitol. We had continuous presence at the Capitol. Many of the groups here locally and a lot of national folks came down to Arizona, and we were able to have a presence there, really trying to fight this, trying to get as many people there as possible to get that message that, that it shouldn't be signed. Unfortunately, it was signed. A lot of us were there when, the announcement came out that Governor Brewer decided to go ahead and sign the law. So, it was pretty devastating. I think for a lot of us, it wasn't, it wasn't surprising, but at the same time, it was sort of like, what is it going to happen now? How can we prepare? How can we make sure that people continue to mobilize and fight against this law? So yeah, I was at the Capitol and just probably like Carlos and Natalie. But Carlos was doing a lot more work in the background.
Yeah, so like Erika, I was at the Capitol too. I think we had been there for months before, trying to get the bill stopped when it was a bill, then trying to get the governor to sign it. But I think more of just speaking physically where I was, I think where we were as a movement it was a shifting point. It was a place where we really needed the entire community to fight, where we knew we had to all come together and really change the strategies that were happening. And one of those being really bringing affected people forward, people that could be affected by SB 1070, and really shifting on the organizing. For us, it was a moment where we knew no one was going to come and save us, whether it was a court, other organizations, and we developed a defense system. At the time, developing community defense groups, the Comités de Defensa del Barrio, developing a whole community defense plan and really looking at how we were going to stop deportations and change things ourselves. And 5 years later, I think this is a point where we celebrate that resilience. We celebrate how people stood together and some left. At the time we were, screaming, no one's leaving, we're going to stay strong. But the reality was things were going to shift so much that some people did leave. And we saw people trickle back, but those that stayed, I think, Nataly and Erika being one of them, and their families at risk, they stayed and fought and developed strategies to keep their families together. So I think physically we were all at the Capitol, where we're going to be again today, this afternoon, fighting, trying everything we could, whether it was marches, actions, anything we could to stop this law. But it was mentally, really where we were at is shifting strategies and taking control of our own destiny.
And Nataly, I understand that SB 1070 is one of the things that pushed you to get involved. Can you talk about what it meant and what moved you to push back against it?
For myself, once I saw the law being signed into effect, I was one of those persons that I was getting ready to actually leave But once I started joining and going into marches and knowing my rights and all that stuff, knowing that I was little by little losing the fear, I wanted to fight back, and I wanted my community to join and be the same way, for my community not to leave and for all of us to stay here and continue to fight. We came here for one reason, and I really believe that it was something that I needed to do. I needed to push my community.
And when people were rallying that summer of 2010, some people rallied with signs that said, "We are all Arizona," and some people rallied with signs that said, "We are not Arizona," trying to compare the goodness of their city or state to the state of hate that this place became representative of. Since that time, you all have all become national figures in one way or another. Can you talk about how Arizona is unique and how Arizona is related to the rest of the country's policies as well?
I mean, I think for us, for a lot of the dreamers, it was a very interesting, it was a bit of an interesting dynamic because in 2010, at least like some of the dreamers that were starting to mobilize here in Arizona, I think it was like the very first time, the very first year that we were able to actually come out of the shadows and say we were undocumented and like in a personal level. There were a couple of folks that had already done it in the past, but I think that was a year that sparked a lot more people to here in Arizona, within the Dreamers say we're undocumented. And I feel like it was sort of like Carlos said, it was like a moment of figuring out like how do we move forward, how do we come out of the shadows, how do we make sure that we are telling our own stories. And I feel like being in Arizona kind of really gave us that platform to show the rest of the country this is how messed up it is when the federal government, ICE, and DHS are working with our own state to go after our own people. And not only telling the stories, but also showing the examples of a lot of the folks here who we work with, a lot of even our own families who are being stopped by the police, who are being questioned, who are being sent to immigration, to Cheddar Jar Pius jail. I feel like a lot of folks tell me like when they come to Arizona is when they can actually feel how horrible it is really to have the local police and the local sheriff work with ICE and work with the federal folks to detain our community. For a lot of them, it's a shock. And thank God a lot of states, didn't pass it. I know that some did try to do the same thing as Arizona. Some were successful at defeating it, some of them were not, like Georgia, like Alabama. But I think we were able to really get together with a lot of those folks and figure out how we could, move forward as undocumented people, trying to figure out a different way by coming out of the shadows, by really fighting for our own communities and stopping deportations, even if it had to be like one by one.
I think 1070 also marked, and something we were, and hi to Erika's mom back there. I think it also marked that we were that petri dish, that we were the experiment for the rest of the country, and unfortunately it was for both sides. We had Napolitano, who was now the head of the DHS, and took a lot of the policies of Arizona and Arizona by the country. Unfortunately, the things we were fighting and trying to stop here in 7, 8, 9, and in 2010 with SB1070, in 2013 became the norm for the rest of the country with secure communities. So it was great. There was a lot of people who came out from all over the country to help out. And part of what you talked about, there was folks saying we are not Arizona, and there was folks who were in similar situations where there was the states in the South. But a lot of the people, it was really inspiring to see cities like Washington, D.C. take that slogan and make it reality back home, and pass a ICE-free zone in Washington, D.C., obviously the ICE-free NYC in Chicago, the California Trust Act. I think it was really inspiring to see those places that could and maybe had some more progressive politics push something like that. But I think what was unfortunate is that who was supposed to be our friend, which was Obama and Napolitano, who came from Arizona, ended up being the worst deporter-in-chief in the history of this country, and now maybe going to reach 3 million people by the end of this administration. So again, good was exported from 2010 and from SB1070 in the fight, but unfortunately also the normalization of the attrition and the Arizona type policies was also exported throughout the rest of the country.
And so maybe can you all give us a sense of where are we now 5 years after SB 1070, both in terms of the policies that were confronting the evolution of ICE and immigration enforcement, as well as the movement here in Arizona? Where are you and what are you doing, and what is the evolution of the human rights struggle?
Nataly,
since you're in a noisy office, maybe we can start with you. What is your daily life like now, and how did you get there from 5 years ago?
My daily life. I mean, I think it's changed a lot. I mean, from having that fear of not wanting to come out as undocumented and not wanting anybody to know my status, and being able to see how I've changed, I think, a lot, and a lot of my family members and a lot of the community members was giving them the cursos and the plan de defensa, kind of getting them out to not be afraid. I think it's been rough but good, some kind change, but we still have family members being detained or family members being deported. I mean, from that, like I said, the damage has been done, and somehow we've been trying to make it not so it won't continue to happen.
Yeah, I think for us it's been also, learning how to, big part of it is learning how to fight case by case, learning how to fight even our own cases from our own families. In the case of like Nataly and I, within our own families, we were able to experience how it was to get people stopped by the police or by the sheriff, and sort of going through the entire process of deportation or almost being deported. And all of that process has really taught us how to defend ourselves in a way that we can mobilize our own community, mobilize a lot of people here in Arizona to be able to, whether it's stop the deportation as soon as the process starts, or even having to stop, even if we have to even stop a bus that has, folks who are being deported. So I think, from then until now, at least in individually and within the folks that I work very closely with, I feel like we have been able to be a lot more creative on how to defend ourselves. And unfortunately, it shouldn't be like that. I think, and unfortunately, we hope that we could change policies, that we could change the law here in Arizona, but it's been so tough, and I think we have a long way to go to be able to change the laws here, but we can change the mentalities of our own community to get rid of the fear. We can change a lot of the city policies that are happening right now. Phoenix is trying to pass a Phoenix City ID that could potentially get some folks who are undocumented with an ID. That, I mean, at least it helps, right? We have been able to take SB 1070 to court. We have been able to take our pilot to court. So a lot of these, smaller wins that perhaps are not changing laws, but are changing our state little by little. And hopefully we can continue to do that until we get to that point that we can change actual laws.
I think where we're at now, I wish I would, like, hindsight's 2020, wish I knew a lot of what we know now back in 2010. I think from the beginning, or at least my entire adult life that I've been doing this type of work, we've been chasing this magic pill, the CIR bill that was going to help us and solve everything for us. And with that strategy came compromising our community, accepting that some will be deported, some are good and some are bad. And I think it took us a while, and then not till Erika's mom gets caught or Nataly's uncle gets caught and they're both criminalized do we realize that we've actually been harming ourselves. We've been running with harmful strategies that have led to the detention and deportation of all these people. And I wish I could go back to 2010 and be more of a place where we're at now, and looking at intersections of the LGBT, looking at intersections of the criminal justice system, looking at places where we could really make impact, and also be just more radical in our stance, and really being able to, with what we did with the Not One More deportation campaign, is be an abolitionist movement towards detention and deportation, that having this extra harm done to our communities, the separation, is not okay. And so, I mean, I wish we could have gone back to 2010 and said those things, and said them loud enough to prevent a lot of what's happening. I think SB1070 allowed Democrats a scapegoat, and they learned a strategy then that they could blame Republicans for doing things like SB1070 or what they did in Georgia and Alabama. And as long as Republicans were worse than they were going to be okay, and they were going to keep gaining Latinos to their party. And so, knowing now that we were all political ploys, that our families being deported, I had a bunch of people, 4 people in my family deported, 6 who had to sit in detention, 6 of them who had to be in detention, 2 that were able to stay. Having known that we were going to go through all that back then, I think that the movement and our fight would have looked a lot different. And so I hope now that we've learned from those lessons, I think we were able to push hard, make the president make some changes. And now I think it's at a point where we march today saying it's not enough, and we're not going to stop till everyone in our community is safe, and our families aren't separated anymore.
And Carlos, I think you brought us in towards what will probably be our last question for the session, is just what are the lessons of SB 1070? If you knew now what you knew then, what are the things that we did well? What are the things that we want to improve upon? What are the things that that moment 5 years ago taught us, or the past evolution of these past 5 years that really inform the work that you're doing now? What are the lessons that you take that inform your daily work? And especially, I think, going into this presidential season, Carlos brought up the question of politics and political parties. What are the lessons of SB 1070 for the moment that we're in and the moment that we're entering into?
I mean, I think for me, big lessons, at least I wasn't, I mean, my involvement started getting I started getting a lot more involved after SB 1070, like Natalie was saying, right? I was a lot more focused before on the DREAM Act at the federal level, and trying to get sort of that change, and then something happened in my state, and that's when I started really trying to pay attention to what was going on here. How did that come about? And folks like Carlos and a lot of the folks from here in the community have been fighting this for a while, and just kind of like putting the two together, the sort of the fight that we had at the federal level with the DREAM Act, and figuring out what's happening in my state, I was able to realize that for so long our movement has been so tied to a party. For so long, like Carlos was saying, our movement has been so tied into this dream legislation that's going to happen one day, like CIR, this entire package that's going to happen only if you elect more Democrats. That's sort of what has been sold to me since I started getting involved. And when SB 1070 hit, like, and seeing all the aftermath of what's happening in my own state, I was able to realize that we need to be a lot more critical of both parties. We need to make sure that we continue to really take care of our own community, to figure out how do we make sure that folks, in the federal government, that, why is Obama still allowing ICE to be in Arpaio's jail? Why is, DHS still continuing to have raids here in Arizona? We just had one raid not too long ago. So, to me, it's just, my biggest lesson is we need to really be a lot more critical of both parties, and in this upcoming elections, we're going to continue to have sort of the same talking points from almost every candidate. Specifically, already from a lot of the Democrats are going to continue to say we support immigration reform, but they don't ever touch on what they're going to be doing with DHS. They don't ever say what they're going to be doing with the detention centers. in Arizona and across the country. So to me, it's definitely a good, really key point that we need to continue to make sure our community is aware of.
Nataly, lessons learned in the past 5 years that you bring into the work that you do?
I mean, to me, I think it's more that everything happens in our backyard. And I think once we were, like Carlos said, we were trying to have the magic wand happen of immigration reform or anything to come and save us. But reality was that we needed to help our communities. We needed to keep, I think, focus on getting eyes out of our own communities instead of trying to go, yes, push nationally, but at the same time, the harm's being happening in our community. So to me, it's more about every state focusing on their community members and caring about our communities being safe.
Great. Well, we're about to hit the half-hour mark, so I want to thank all of our panelists. We're going to be doing this throughout the weekend. Our next one is tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We'll be visiting with women on the front lines of the immigration fight. Tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Pacific, we'll have a Spanish language hangout on civil disobedience in the immigrant rights movement. And Saturday morning, we'll be looking at the next generation of resistance and the road ahead. So I want to turn it back to just each of you. Thank you for being on. And are there any final thoughts that you want to share with viewers today?
Yeah, I could close it off. I think the biggest lesson and where we're at now is knowing that organizing works. When it comes down to one deportation, an individual deportation that we're fighting, a city or statewide policy, or we're asking the president to stop deportations, or at some point some sort of reform that gives our people a pathway to gain documentation. I think centering a movement around the people that are affected, the people that live this through every day, like Nataly said, that it's in our communities, and no other movement that I've known of, now that I've been able to experience other places, do we have people not affected by policies trying to affect change in Washington or anywhere else. So I think one big lesson and one thing we need to change in the immigrant rights world is having us speak for ourselves, not allowing DC-based or people that aren't affected by these policies to decide what the compromise is and which people in our family get to stay and which people get to go. And so, again, for me, it's all about continuing to organize, create bases of strong people that are affected by these policies that are going to confront them face on and hopefully change the direction in which it's going, which at this point, we're losing people from our communities every day. So thank you for having us, and thank you for putting this on.
Nataly, Erika, final thoughts?
No, just echoing what Carlos said. We gotta continue. We have a lot of work to do here in Arizona, and we really hope that one day, looking 5 years from now, that we can come back and really say that we're a lot more ahead of the work that we need to do. But let's keep going, and thank you so much for inviting us.
Same with me. I mean, the fight continues. It hasn't stopped, and organizing our community members is the best way to fight anything that happens. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone, and we hope to see you on one of our next virtual conferences of the Not One More Puente, Arizona, on a weekend where we're marching for an ICE-free AZ, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.